Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Beyond the Code. It has been a minute, but what could I tell you? Summer makes it really hard to schedule people. I guess everybody's got their summer vacation plans and their kids at home. So there's been a lot of canceling and rescheduling and pushing off, but I'm very happy to bring to you this brand new, fresh episode with CJ Hetherington, the very young and very bright co-founder and CEO of Limitless, one of the fastest growing prediction market platforms. I know from a personal level, I've been involved with prediction markets for a long time, but only actually started having such a good time with them during these last few months during the World Cup. So I'm sure a lot of other people could relate. We're going to hear from CJ all about how he founded Limitless and a lot of really cool initiatives that he did in Ukraine in the midst of the war, or at the beginning of the war. We're still in the midst of the war, I guess. Without further ado, CJ, welcome to the show. Welcome to Beyond the Code, the podcast where industry experts and brilliant legal minds discuss the impact of new emerging technologies. I'm your host, Yitzi Hammer, a lawyer and tech enthusiast. Join us as we explore the legal, regulatory, and ethical issues surrounding AI, blockchain, and more. Get ready to go beyond the code and stay ahead of the game. Where are you, man?
I'm in Japan right now.
Nice.
We'll be heading
What are
to
you doing
Korea
there?
in a couple of days. I was just at the WebEx conference here. A lot of exciting stuff actually happening in APAC. I was quite surprised. The Prime Minister actually opened the conference, and
Wow.
there was kind of a lot of engagement from regulators and institutions and enterprises. So really exciting things happening in Asia with regard to digital assets right now.
Amazing. And where is Limitless fitting and all that?
So we have Limitless Research. It's kind of like a forecasting desk that we set up in Asia. We've been tinkering with some different form factors for the product. Like in Korea, we recently launched like a play money product, which is quite interesting. We're exploring to enter the Japanese market as well.
Cool.
So a lot going on, a lot is happening.
Okay, so I don't want to talk about Limitless. I want to go back. I want to welcome you to the show, CJ Hetherington, founder of Limitless. I think like one of the youngest founders I've had here on the podcast. What are you, like 15, right?
just about,
Not far off. 25?
25, that's right.
25. 25-year-old founder.
You sound like my co-founder. He's always saying I'm 15.
How old is he?
A little bit older.
A little bit older. Okay, so he's like the babysitter. I got it. CJ Hetherington, 25-year-old founder of Limitless Exchange. What do you guys go by? Limitless Market, Limitless Exchange?
Limitless. Our parent company is Limitless Labs.
Limitless Labs. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And what a whirlwind it's been for prediction markets over these last couple months. The World Cup has probably been the best thing that's ever happened to prediction markets, no? I mean, what kind of volumes are you seeing?
I think the best thing that ever happened to prediction markets was first
US
of all
elections.
stablecoins, and the second thing was the kind of shift in the regulatory environment that happened following the election in the United States. I think prediction markets have always kind of been a way for hobbyist election forecasters to express their views about the election. But what really changed this time round is that stablecoins enabled us to export self-custodial financial services to the world, and then the result of the election in the United States meant that there was a kind of huge shift in the regulatory climate, and we kind of transitioned into a more rules-based order where innovative companies, whether that's digital asset companies or derivatives companies, were able to go and get regulated, or at least get themselves on a pathway to becoming regulated in the future.
Okay, so you'll tell me a little bit about that in a minute, but first tell me, how did you end up founding a prediction market startup in the midst of like the most exciting time to be in this market, probably also relatively early on at the age of 25?
So, who
are you?
I'm a nerd, first and
Okay.
foremost, and I've been, started trading commodities and indices in crypto when I was about 16 years old. And so I've always been really interested in, money and markets, conceptually, and spend a lot of my time there. And then, yeah, kind of, started building
But before you go forward,
apps.
like, how did that happen? Because like I know, I don't know if everybody else knows that you grew up and I think still currently live in the Lake District, which is like I don't know how to explain it for Americans, but it's like I guess like middle America, like maybe like West Virginia style. Like you're up in the nature, your neighbor is like maybe like a few miles apart from you, not like it's not like growing up in central London or Manhattan where you'd necessarily have access to like everybody talking about markets and trading. Like how did you fall into trading at such a young age, growing up in like ultimately the mountains?
Yeah. So I mean, that's a great question. I guess I had a computer. And considering I was quite a weird kid. And I guess the conversations that were happening outside of my computer, weren't that interesting to me. And so, and neither was, to be honest, like what I was learning at school. And so the computer for me was like this kind of escape and this kind of resource where I was able to acquire knowledge and join different communities. And actually, like, I mean, how I discovered crypto for the first time, I was even a little bit younger than 16. It was a few years before. It was kind of an accident. And I'm not sure if I should admit this or not, but I was torrenting Microsoft Office because I couldn't afford a license. And that was when I discovered Bitcoin because it was an extension of the kind of internet freedom and privacy movement. And I started using different products. Like one of the earliest products was Proton Mail, and this kind of led me down the pathway to like different decentralized technologies and privacy technologies. And then, yeah, I guess I just kind of had a thirst for, learning. And at some point, like in 2017, Bitcoin started to get a lot of kind of mainstream attention. And I remember my dad, he told me like, because he knew I was a nerd, right? So he wanted to put me to work. He said, "Go and find the next Bitcoin." And I thought about it for a while, and even at some point, I was kind of like a Bitcoin maxi. So I was like, "Dad, you know what? I think the next Bitcoin is Bitcoin." And he was like, "No, that's boring. Like, you come on, son. Like, you can do
You
better
could do
than
better.
that." Yeah, exactly. I was like, "Okay." And then I just kind of went all in on Ethereum instead.
What a
And yeah,
mistake.
it just well, at the time, not necessarily, right?
Right.
It was very early. So yeah, and then I was never involved as a builder. I was more just kind of part of the community and a passive spectator, I would say. But that changed in like late 2019 when I started taking part in virtual hackathons and actually building stuff.
All
And
self-taught.
yeah, completely self-taught, and yeah, basically just poking around in discords and Reddit and trying to make friends on the internet. And that's what led me to this point.
Wow. Okay, so what was your first thing that you built?
The first thing that I built was kind of like a gamified NFT protocol during DeFi summer. And then in 2021, I started a company called Atlantis World, which was like, during the height of the metaverse boom as such. And
When ETH was
actually,
trading at like 4K.
yeah, and actually when Meta announced, a couple of weeks ago that they're building in prediction markets, I started to get some kind of PTSD because
Because you remember
I,
when they launched
I
their
was like,
metaverse?
no, yeah, I remember when
Not
they launched
again.
their metaverse. I was like, oh, not again, like the top is here, just kidding. But Yeah, so we were building this kind of gamified world where you could take your game character and run around and learn about self-custodial finance or about DeFi. And so,
Okay.
you could complete different quests, a lot of different DeFi protocols and blockchains, kind of sponsored quests that we created inside of this like game world. And then, like for example, you could run into an Aave bank, and you could get effectively a high interest savings account because also yields in DeFi were a lot higher than they are today. You could get almost like access to a savings account from inside of a game world, which was a really kind of fun and engaging way to onboard people into DeFi at the time when it was still very taboo. And then also, yeah, just kind of got like nerd sniped into nonprofit at some point. Also, kind of
What
built.
does that mean? You got nerd sniped into nonprofit. You're speaking nerd language.
So my co-founder at the time was Ukrainian, and the war started in Ukraine, and we immediately started raising crypto basically for humanitarian aid. And I think within about 16 hours from the full scale invasion, we'd already managed to raise like $1 million.
Wow.
And we worked with some really cool people on that. Like for example, Ilya from Near, who was actually like the co-author of the Transformer paper. But then also like Vitalik Buterin got involved. He personally donated $2.5 million, and we started running this kind of nonprofit operation, which was powered by crypto. In Ukraine, at some point, we even launched a virtual Mastercard debit network that was funded and powered by stable coins that allowed people who'd been displaced by the war to use Apple or Google Play and Store to cover basic needs. And then we ended up, hosting a conference and actually brought Vitalik Buterin to Ukraine for the first time ever.
Wow. Are you
And
Ukrainian? Like where did that come from? Like where did your passion for Ukraine come from? Or was just just a good guy?
yeah, the first time I went to Ukraine was after the war started, so I don't have any
Wow.
family connection or any historical connection to Ukraine. Just my co-founder was Ukrainian, and kind of fell down this rabbit hole, and was kind of inspired in thinking that we could use crypto for good because when the war started, you couldn't actually get access to the traditional banking system. It kind of shut down.
Hmm.
And, big institutions, whether that's, the European Union or international NGOs kind of move very slowly. And so crypto kind of emerged as this lifeline that could action, funding, capital formation, and then like kind of fund people who are on the ground doing important stuff. And yeah, that was kind of how I got into it. And then I decided to host a conference because we'd evacuated some of our team members from Ukraine. And I remember one day I was standing with them waiting to get into the elevator. And I started to hear like this purge sound, like this alarm on the phone, the air raid siren. And I mean, I had no idea what it was, but I was like a little bit like, what is that? And then understanding that it was an air raid siren, I kind of had this very sobering moment where I was like, because I always remember when I was a kid, growing up in the UK, my great grandma, so that is like the mom of my grandma, would always tell me like war stories about like how she was caught in Coventry, like during the Blitz. And I was like, oh wow, like we're here again. Like we're in a modern European city where you've got one of the largest kind of IT software developer communities in the world, and people are spending an agonizing amount of time in bomb shelters. And that was like a really sobering moment for me where I just understood that the world had changed somehow. And I thought, well, if people are spending most of the day or night in a bomb shelter, let's do a hackathon in a bomb shelter. And everyone was like, you're crazy. It's not going to work. People are going to die and you're going to be responsible for that. But, after a couple of weeks, everyone was like, okay, fine, let's do it. I think I was persistent enough. Everyone was like, okay, fine. whatever you want. And so we did it. And Vitalik Buterin was kind enough and brave enough to join us as well. And yeah, I think it made a nice impact. I mean, a small impact, but a nice impact. And also after that, a lot more events.
Well, how many people did you get? Like you were actually in a shelter with Vitalik and a bunch of hackers, developers.
The deputy prime minister Vitalik, but about 500.
That's wild.
500 hackers participated.
How big was the bomb shelter?
It's a pretty big one.
Wow.
There's a innovation park in Ukraine called Unit City. And they actually have a really good bomb shelter.
Wow.
They have 5G down there. I always remember when I first got there, I was like, because in the UK we have very bad like mobile service. I think when things get built a long time ago, they kind of suck,
right.
and it's really hard to replace. But when you build like a little bit later, but from scratch, so you have much better connectivity, right? And so I was like, damn, they have 5G in the bomb shelter. Talking about the Lake District, like we don't even have 3G most of the above ground places. So yeah, it was a pretty luxury bomb shelter, I would say, a pretty good one.
Wow.
And it was enough space for us to host a big event. So that was really
any
cool.
like major projects come out of that, or just good vibes?
There was some people that had met at the hackathon and ended up, launching startups together, and building different products. But yeah, I mean, nothing really super notable. It was more just
very cool.
I think the biggest impact that we made was not actually the event itself, but it kind of shifted the Overton window, because before then, so we hosted the event in September 2022. The war started in February. And during that time, from February to September, there was no event. There was no hackathon. There was no conference. There were very few gatherings in public, at least in the crypto community, because people were, naturally afraid to organize something in case something happened and that they would feel responsible for that, right? But after we did it and everything was fine, I think the biggest impact that we made is that there were a string of events and more regular meetups and gatherings that kind of brought people together after. And that's the part that I'm kind of most proud about. It's not that what we did, but it's what people felt like they could do after we left.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so where did you go after that? I know it from a different perspective, but like this is more like modern day warfare. Like like you said, like we've been building with bomb shelters for the last however many decades. So it's like integrated part of our lifestyle at this point. I mean,
yeah, but you know a little bit something about bomb shelters and missiles yourself. So
yes,
don't be so humble.
And so do you. You got a chance to experience it a little bit last year.
Yeah,
was it last year? No, it was just a few months ago.
Yeah, it was a few months ago, or even like 2 months ago or something.
Yeah.
Time flies in crypto, right?
Time flies, man. Okay,
we've had 4 market cycles since I was last in Israel.
And they've all been downturn.
Yeah, sadly.
Barely any. I hardly call it a cycle. Okay, yeah. So
prediction markets.
Well, you didn't get to prediction markets yet. At what point did you get to? So you wrapped up Atlantis World, presumably like in the last bear, like after Celsius and FTX and the whole market went to shit.
So technically, we still have the same Discord server since 2021.
Okay, all the NFT communities, I still am in their server that nobody's posted for the last 3.5 years.
Well, the Atlantis World Discord server became the Limitless Discord server, and we gave an airdrop. We gave an airdrop to Atlantis World NFT holders, so they kind of stayed part of the community, which was really nice. And then we started Limitless the end of 2023. Started focusing on prediction markets.
Same co-founder that you had in Atlantis World? Like you guys just decided to spin off together?
Yeah, and we also started working with a couple of other co-founders. So my original co-founder from Atlantis World, Rev, he's no longer working on Limitless. but we started Limitless with Roman and Deemer. And prior to Limitless, Roman and Deemer were working on a generative AI app for consumers called Reface.
Hmm.
It was like super viral in 2020. It had like 300 million downloads. They were number one on the App Store and Google
Wow.
Play in 100 plus countries. Even Elon Musk was using their app. And it's kind of funny because at the moment where everyone was pivoting from crypto to AI, they kind of came, the other way. I'm not sure if they regret that or not. You'll have to ask them. But it's been a great journey. It's been a great ride. And Reface actually, it was before LLMs, right? This was a few years ago now. And they built their own machine learning model for face swapping. So basically you could, put your face in a movie scene or a music video or something like that, or beautify your face. And we started talking to Oles, who is the CTO of Reface, and he always has a lot of crazy and great ideas. We had a lunch one day. This was actually in Kiev, and he told me that he wanted to create an economic system where swarms of autonomous agents would compete against each other to mine knowledge to determine if a piece of information on the internet was true or not. Because obviously nowadays we face a lot of disinformation, and it's very hard to trust what you see on the internet. I think that's been accelerated even more now, with AI and deepfakes and all of that stuff. And basically, his vision was if you had an AI agent swarm that was really good at determining if a piece of information was true, it would almost be like a profitable investment fund where it would return capital to investors for being right. But at the same time, if it was trying to manipulate the market or if it was bad at determining if something was true or not, then it would lose money to the extent that it wouldn't cover its computation cost. And so it would effectively die. And so we would have this kind of life or death game between AI agents to prove whether information was true or not on the internet. And I thought, wow, that's a very powerful idea. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I immediately thought that prediction markets would be a good way to implement this. But at the same time, we thought it was much too early for this kind of AI agent vision. And also, at the end of the day, we wanted to build a business, we wanted to build a product. And so we started kind of playing to our strengths, which was consumer. And yeah, been fully focused on prediction markets since then, since late 2023.
What was it like in 2023 building in prediction markets? Like I know that prediction markets have been around for tens and tens of years. Um, and I know that even Kalshi and Polymarket have been building, for a number of years, but really like only in the US elections did they come to like popular culture. So like, what was it like
Yeah.
building in prediction markets when nobody knew what prediction markets were? When I say nobody, I mean
So,
not the nerds.
so we were, I think, in the midst of the Farcaster peak, where a lot of smart and cool people were talking to each other, building communities on Farcaster. And we were kind of building in public, so we were building something, then recording a video about it, then posting it, then writing about it. And we were very fortunate that our pre-seed lead investor won confirmation, which was actually also an early investor in Polymarket, but in some other really big winners of the last few crypto cycles as well. And they actually reached out to us, and they'd been excited about prediction markets for a long time. And they made quite a few bets. Not all of them had paid off. Certainly, Polymarket seemed like it was paying off, and it certainly has paid off today. But they were basically looking to bet more on the category because they thought that it's going to grow to trillions of dollars in volume. I think at the time there was around 50 million in monthly volume, right? Which is pretty nuts when you consider that just Limitless itself has processed billions trading volume. Back then, it was still a lot more nascent. But I remember they actually reached out to us, and we had about 6 calls in 1 week, and then they decided to wire us 1.5 million, and we started building. Went from there. But it sounds like a very easy and straightforward story. It wasn't, because we've been around and building different products and pivoting and iterating effectively for years before that, right?
And what's it like being in the prediction market space and not being like Polymarket or Kalshi? Because I feel like they just like dominate the conversation.
I think it's good because um, I think that you have more freedom to look at the market from first principles
Hmm.
and actually think deeply about what the opportunities are, and do not what people think you should do or what what they want you to do, but you kind of have the freedom to have your own view, and then execute on that, which is something that Polymarket and Kalshi don't have, right? Like if you think about Kalshi today, I think around 90% of their revenue is coming from sports markets. It's very hard for them to, kind of go beyond that, and build something different, because they're already a very large company with a heavy concentration of revenue in one category. Whereas for Limitless, we can think objectively about the market. We can think objectively about what the opportunities are, and we can effectively go after them, in any means that we believe is necessary.
So tell me a little bit about that. Like, what are some of the things that you guys have like been trying to see if they work, and what has worked and what hasn't?
Well, one of the first things, that we pioneered, back in 2024, is these kind of short duration up down prices markets, where people are kind of predicting whether Bitcoin will reach a certain price by 4 p.m. Eastern time, or what the price of Bitcoin will be 1 hour from now. We were actually the first prediction market that launched these kind of markets. Um, I definitely think that has worked from the perspective of, if you look at the on-chain market, I think around 40% of Polymarket's revenues generated by this category.
Yeah.
Um, and so definitely think that was something that we got right and we were super excited about. And we continue to double down on this vertical. I also think that regions outside of the US are still very much underserved, and adoption of prediction markets is much lower, as well as awareness of prediction markets is much lower in markets around the world. Outside of the US, particularly in APAC, that continues to be somewhere where we kind of put a lot of our efforts. And then, we are also entering the US market. We're currently under a 180-day review period by the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. And we're kind of, working hard and trying to get our designation so that we can serve US customers as well. But what we think is that the institutional opportunity, talking about hedging and risk transfer for prediction markets, is at least 10x larger than the sports opportunity. And so, even though sports is the largest source of near term cash flow for prediction markets today, hedging and risk transfer is the really big market, is the holy grail, and is the end game for prediction markets. And so, once we get our designation, we'll be able to fully focus on this kind of sector where there is no incumbent today, and build a very large and meaningful business, which brings true societal value and actually shows what prediction markets are capable of and what they can do for the world. Not only from an entertainment perspective, but also from a financial and economic perspective. They can bring a lot of value, and they can kind of fill a lot of gaps when it comes to kind of covering the downside risk that investors have in their portfolios, which traditional equity or commodity markets don't cover.
Could you like explain to me how that would play out, like that hedging for? I know, like I've seen some very few consumer use cases. I know that a mutual friend of ours, Elon from Collider, mentioned to me that when they were putting on an event here in Israel, and he wasn't sure if maybe the war was going to affect it, he went and he bought some markets, saying that there would be a war, and then if there would have been a war, then the market would have paid out, and if not, then he would have kind of would have offset some of the losses he would have had associated with the conference. And I just recently saw that a ice cream shop in LA buys every day a market saying that that it's going to rain, basically. And then if it rains and consumers don't show up, then he gets a payout. And if it doesn't, then consumers show up and he sells ice cream. So like that those are some of the hedging use cases that I'm familiar with. What are you referring to, like from a on a more macro perspective?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of applications for this. I think the addressable market is very large. I think the very powerful thing about prediction markets is that almost anything you can say with words, you can get exposure to, and that's very powerful. And so I think there are a lot of use cases, and a lot of use cases which haven't materialized yet, and a lot of liquidity which is yet to be built out. But some of the markets that we're most excited about are things like biotech and drug development, and also like reinsurance. So interestingly, insurance providers actually get insurance on their insurance, right? And this is a very large market, and it's a very much over the counter market, which is settled according to privately negotiated indemnity agreements. And our vision is like, imagine if you can actually transform that into an exchange traded market where you can reconfigure your portfolio as a reinsurance provider in real time. Let's say there is a, I don't know, fire in Texas, right? A reinsurance provider would want to go and decrease their exposure to Texas, but they would need to offload their indemnity agreements or sign some new indemnity agreements in order to achieve that. Imagine if they could just do it on an
Like package
exchange
into a
in real
market?
time. Exactly. It's very
Wow.
powerful. And whenever you transform a market from an over the counter market based on precedents that we've seen in finance over the last couple of decades, it becomes more efficient, it becomes more fair, and it actually grows. Reinsurance today has 700 billion in annual premiums, and it's our belief that it can become even larger if we manage to implement this in an exchange traded format.
So what's barring you from doing that today? Like you talked about, getting approval in the US, et cetera. Like why can't you go ahead and do that now outside of the US? Like what's holding you back?
So you cannot really deal with institutions without a regulatory license in place. Um,
Hmm.
and so that's the kind of main barrier for us. And yeah, we're currently going through that process. We managed to hire a fantastic regulatory and compliance team in the US. Our chief compliance officer actually just joined us from $100 billion revenue company. He was a chief compliance officer at $100 billion revenue company. He just joined Limitless a couple of weeks ago. Our chief regulatory officer,
Congrats.
thank you. Our chief regulatory officer, Scott, he was formerly associate general counsel at SIBO. He was there for many years. He also spent many years at DTCC. And so we've managed to build a really strong regulatory and compliance team. And they're helping us to build out this regulated business. And we're also engaging with regulators and building out things like our surveillance kind of practices and thinking through like how do we stop insider trading, how do we combat this, how do we make sure that there's no market manipulation, and how do we ensure that we comply with all the regulations for a designated contract market or a derivatives venue in the United States. And so yeah, I think, as I mentioned, that was one of the major shifts that happened with the new administration. I'm not sure how much time we're going to call them new for, maybe until after the midterms. But just for the sake of, a clear explanation, let's go with that. So I think what really changed is that the kind of regulators became more open to innovative products, and there is a much more clear rules-based order and ability for people to come and follow the rules and get regulated. Whereas before, it was not really clear, what the rules were, and there
Yeah.
was a lot of
Yeah.
gatekeeping
Yeah.
that stopped kind of these kind of companies from achieving institutional adoption and working with institutions.
Fantastic. Okay. Tell me about the World Cup, man. First of all, England.
Don't want to talk about it.
I mean, their
If you
game
talked to me
against
1 week
France
ago,
was
I'd be like,
should have been the final game. I mean, whether or
yeah,
not whether or not you think they played well, the fact that there was so much entertainment involved made it worthwhile. Last night
Yeah,
was boring AF. Um, but yeah, the English they just never fail to disappoint. Like
that's true.
I'm married to a Londoner, so every time I get excited, like when they get to the semifinals, quarterfinals, whatever, my wife is like, "You just don't know. It's just like don't waste your energies. It's not happening. It's not coming home."
Yeah,
um,
actually, my biggest fear throughout the tournament was France, because they were so
Same.
uniform.
I assumed that they were going to face France in the finals.
Yeah,
Didn't
and when
see.
France lost, I was like, we really might do it. I was like,
Don't
okay,
don't.
we really might do it this time. And yeah, it is what it is. But I think at least Tuchel rested Saka, so we could win the third place. Right, that was a very good move.
Yeah. Man. So, but what were you seeing like on the back end of Limitless with the World Cup? I mean, like it's the first time that I've ever engaged in prediction markets. Like it's the most fun I've ever had. Sports betting. Like also just watching some of the markets move in real time. Like in the in the third to last in the England versus France game. Like if you like I was sure that France was going to win. And so sorry, was it English versus it was anyways, some of the games like if you watch like immediately post goal like how the price fluctuates, like there's a lot that could be done. What are you seeing like in the back end?
Yeah, so I think as you mentioned, like the in-game part, I think one of the strongest insights we came away from this tournament with is people want to trade live. People want to
Live.
trade
Yeah.
when the game is happening. And we actually saw that, most of the volume was happening when the game was actually in play. And I think that's one of the most exciting parts about prediction markets, versus traditional sports books. Traditional sports books, you place your trades and you can get a cash out at some point, but the cash out is, nowhere near fair value for the position that you have.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of an insult to traders at some point. Whereas prediction market, you can enter and exit positions at any time at what the market believes to be fair value. And this kind of live in-game trading is very fun. I think an extension of that we're going to see much more of is kind of live in-game prop bets. So things like, what's going to happen in the next few minutes? Like, is there going to be a corner? Is there going to be a goal? I think these kind of very short duration markets will turn out to be very interesting. And then I think another interesting thing that we saw is we have a kind of category of markets that we call off the pitch markets. And these are much more like the long tail of things that are happening, behind the scenes. What we saw is that people really love to bet on their favorite individual players doing things. Like, are they going to play or not? Are they going to score or not? Or how many goals are they going to score? And we kind of saw this a lot of focus around individual players, especially the main players, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
Messi and so on and so forth. That was very interesting for us. And I think we're going to see those kind of sparks, grow into a very big fire and see a lot more users engaging with the product in that way moving forwards.
Very cool. Thoughts on where the market is going?
I think that there has never been such a divergence between fundamentals and prices in the history of crypto. I think there's never been a better time to build. I think there's never been a better time to deploy capital. I think there has never been a better time to be in crypto. Everything that we're seeing now is everything that we dreamed of back in 2017. And I think most of us in 2017 didn't believe actually that it would ever happen. And, I kind of thought a lot about why we see this kind of very clear divergence. I think the first thing is that 1010 really ate a lot of liquidity and had a very negative impact on the industry overall. There were more liquidations on that day, which funnily or not funnily, is actually my co-founder Dima's birthday. So
it's my brother's birthday as well.
Yeah. The good thing is I'll never forget when his birthday is, right? I'll never have to worry about that. I don't have to put it in my calendar or anything because I think, 10/10. Yeah. How can I forget this day? There were more liquidations than like COVID or FTX, right? And so I think that had a very big impact on the market. And then what I also think is that people are becoming much more like rounded traders. So historically, like people who would only trade crypto are now getting into like equities and commodities. And also there is like a kind of, roaring performance in equities, not only in the US, like, I mean, recently there has been quite a downturn, but even if you look at, Korean equities or,
I noticed you
IPO
guys
market
launched
in Hong
Korean
Kong.
markets on Limitless. Is that a new thing?
It's not a new thing. We've been we've been always following what's happening in Korean equities, but I think it was a very good year for Korean equities.
Wow.
Before the last couple of weeks where there has been quite a downturn. But a lot of wealth, a lot of growth is happening not only in the US but around the world. And I think that people are kind of getting this attention deficit where they're seeking out opportunities in other markets, not only crypto, but AI and Asian equities as well, which is kind of also having this dampening effect. So, between that and 10/10 and also the fact that people are quite confident in the Trump administration, no matter what they do, means that, there is less and less demand for Bitcoin and crypto assets. But I believe it will change. I believe that some really big winners and really great companies will be created in crypto in the next decade. And I think anytime somebody says crypto is dead or it's so over, it's the perfect time to get in. It's the perfect time to build. We've heard it hundreds of times before. And just remember everyone on the timeline who's rage quitting and walking out of crypto. When they call you
takes
lucky,
the market one step towards maturation.
when they call you lucky in a couple of years, just remember what you went through.
Yeah. Wow, CJ, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining with me. And hopefully we get to have a beer in Tel Aviv sometime soon.
Let's do it.
Thanks,
Thank you very much, man. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Code. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, share with your friends, and to tune in again next week for more fun and insightful conversation.